Hello, and welcome to Uplevel Your Rowing, the Masterclass series for masters rowers to help you train smarter, master mindset, and build healthy habits to help you skyrocket your rowing success. I'm your host, Chris Coughlin, lightweight sculler, coxswain, certified health coach, and the owner of scullinggear.com. This Masterclass series is designed for both recreational rowers and competitive racers. So whether you're new to the sport as an adult, you're coming back to rowing after a break, or you've been a lifelong rower, there's something in this series for you. I hope you find these interviews to be fun, informative, and entertaining. So let's get started. My guest today is Troy Howell, and Troy is the director of the sculling programs at the Craftsbury Outdoor Center in Vermont. Troy has been at the Outdoor Center since 2007, first as a coach, then as fleet manager from 2009 to 2014, when he became director of sculling programs upon Norm Graff's retirement. Troy has been coaching rowing and sculling continuously since 1991 in various settings from the Ravenna Rowing Club, Wichita State University, Duluth Rowing Club, Episcopal School of Dallas, Middlebury College, and at Craftsbury. In addition to managing their sculling camps, Troy also spends part of his year as one of the coaches with the Green Racing Project. And he also works to ensure that their sculling programs complement one another and are consistent with the Outdoor Center's mission and philosophy. Troy's fascination with the idea of deliberately training the nervous system for sculling led him to develop the Comfort in the Boat clinics that have been a unique component of their camp and the GRP curriculum since 2010. So welcome to the series, Troy. It's great to have you.
Thank you.
So let me give a little background in terms of how I know Troy. I've been to a number of Craftsbury's camps. Initially, we did a 3-day camp, and then we did a 4-day camp, and then I did a week-long camp, went with a bunch of people from the Yarmouth Rowing Club at that point. And then I eventually decided I wanted to buy a boat. They put me in a tiny little Casper boat that was the perfect fit for my type petite frame. And I decided that I was going to get serious about sculling and buy the boat and get really serious. So unfortunately, when you buy a boat at Craftsbury, you can't just take it home with you. You have to wait until the end of the season. So at the end of the season, Craftsbury brings all of the boats for sale to the Head of the Charles. And if you've ever been to the Head of the Charles, it's very challenging to drive around Cambridge and Boston during the Head of the Charles. So the idea of putting a boat on top of my car and driving it through traffic was probably not a wise idea. Troy's suggestion was that I get a ride to GRI, which is where the trailer was. And then I actually rowed the boat up the Charles River to the takeout point where my club's trailer was and take it home on the boat trailer, which was a great idea. So that was my first exposure to the Head of the Charles, rowing back up the travel lane. I think it was on a Friday, probably a Saturday afternoon. I don't think it was a Friday. That would have been crazy. So we ended up working out the logistics, and that was a very exciting launch for my brand new boat at the Head of the Charles. So that's how I know Troy. He's also a very competitive racer, and there's a series that they do before the Head of the Charles. A couple weekends, you go down there at the crack of dawn, and everybody practices on the course, and he was also at those practices as well. So welcome again, Troy. Why don't you start by just sharing with how you got into rowing and how you ended up where you are now.
Well, the short version of the long story is that I was watching the 1984 Olympics, the men's singles sculls final on my brother's television in Deer Creek, Oklahoma. And I had some vague notion that there was such a thing as sliding seat rowing somewhere in the world, because I'd probably maybe seen it in passing in the 1980 Olympics or whatever.
Yep.
But I remember turning to my brother in the middle of the final and saying, those boats are pretty cool. And my brother is a good bit older than I am. And so he immediately took the, you are the spoiled younger brother aspect and said, you think mom and dad will buy you one of those, don't you? And I said, no, I didn't think that at all. But 3 years later, I was at the University of Virginia registering for classes, and there was a handbill about 5 by 7 inches sitting on the sidewalk as I went to register for classes, and it said, come join the crew, no experience necessary. Listed a meeting that was going to happen 3 weeks in the future from the day that I found it, and I tossed it on my desk in my dorm and forgot about it. until the day that the meeting was supposed to happen. Saw it that day, thought, okay, what the heck, I'll go, and went, and big lecture hall full of 300 or 400 people interested in crew. And
Wow.
Will Scoggins, who had wrote at Harvard and coached at Brown, at that point, was going to be the coach that year, and he came up and gave a speech worthy of a revival minister, and everybody converted. And we had 100 people come out for just the novice men's crew, and
Wow.
they didn't have enough equipment to accommodate that, so they had to cut down to 40 after just 2 weeks.
Wow.
And so we did a 3-mile erg piece on Model A Concept 2 ergometers, the old style with no digital monitor, just had a bicycle speedometer, and they wouldn't tell you your time, so you didn't really know how you stood. So you just had to take every stroke as though it might be the last stroke you'd get to take for the crew.
See who's competitive, right? Yeah.
Well, I made it somehow, and the novice coach that year told me that he had cut me because he wasn't going to take any third-year rowers as novices, because just you only get 2 years out of the guy, and so it's not worth it. But he was actually, his memory was faulty, because he actually did put me on the list to come to practice the next day. He went through the whole year thinking that I had just refused to be cut and kept showing up. That's not how it happened.
I like your determination. I like that. That's a great story. So tell us a little bit more about the Craftsbury Sculling Program and the Craftsbury Outdoor Center, for those of you who don't know about it.
Well, okay, I'm going to try again to make a long story short, even though my promise to make the last one short was not entirely fulfilled. The Craftsbury Outdoor Center sits on the campus of what used to be a boarding school back in the late 60s and early 70s. And the boarding school ran out of money and closed its doors. And the Spring family drove past that on their way to work at a camp further up the lake, and kept seeing that vacant property, wondering what can we do with this. And they initially bought it in order to have it become a soccer camp in the summer for high school students. And they saw the maple sugaring trails and said, we could make ski trails out of this. And they invited a couple of sculling coaches, including Jim Joy and Norm Graff, my predecessor, to sort of evaluate the place. And Jim Joy came up and skied on the lake with Russell Spring one winter and said, you've got to do a sculling camp here. And so the next spring they did. And for the first few years, it was still the wooden boat era, so there were not a lot of boats available, and so the people who trained at Craftsbury were fairly serious scullers. Right. And over the years, it has morphed into a very egalitarian and public program in which, if you want to get better at sculling, Craftsbury has a sculling camp for you. We accommodate everybody, and if you want to get better at sculling, we want to help you do that. So we run 3-day, 4-day, and 6-day camps, mostly Friday through Sunday and Sunday through Friday. And in almost every camp, there's at least one I've never seen this kind of boat before beginner, and there's at least one person who has medaled at Masters Nationals, and sometimes former Olympians who were sweep rowers who want to do more single sculling or what have you. So I think it's a great, and I've already used this word, but it's a very egalitarian program. Everybody's welcome.
Great. I love that. And they have fantastic food too. They're known as much for their food as they are for their sculling. And it's true. They meet you wherever you are, whether you're brand new, never been in a boat, or whether you're working on racing, or you just like to get a little bit better to go out in your recreational rowing. There's no set expectation or agenda for what you bring to your camp is what they work on with you. It's one of the things I really like about the program. So your topic today is comfort in the boat, training the nervous system, the too often overlooked frontier. So let's begin at the beginning. And if you would just define for us what you mean by comfort in the boat.
I think the simplest way I can come at this is to use a horseback riding analogy. And, if a novice rider gets on a horse's back and that horse is used to being ridden, if a horse thought like a person, that horse knows immediately. I've got a novice rider on my back. Why doesn't this person know how to move on top of a horse?
Mm-hmm.
And so by contrast, a really experienced equestrian who gets on a horse, the horse knows immediately, oh, I've got a really experienced equestrian on my back. So if you take the metaphor one turn further and you give your boat the consciousness of a horse with the anthropomorphized consciousness of a person, you want your boat to appreciate what you're doing up there. It's like, what? Okay, this person knows how to scull. So it's really a matter of learning to wear the boat rather than to sit in the boat as if I'm sitting on a foreign object and I have foreign objects in my hands, and you're apart from the system until you sort of integrate yourself into, okay, boat, oars, person, all part of the same system.
Got it. Okay. All right. So it's really more than just fun boat tricks. If you've ever been to Craftsbury, they do a special session in each camp called Comfort in the Boat, and there are some boat tricks involved, but there's a lot more to it. Would you explain sort of the purpose behind it, the practice?
Well, what that reminds me of is there was a time when I was coaching the Duluth Rowing Club one summer, and there was a really tall, fit, lanky kid that all of the older members of the club were excited to have this kid become part of the program because, oh, this is the prototypical rower. We got to make a rower out of this kid. And one of the masters rowers, who was a very fine single sculler himself, came up to me after practice one day and was like, "Can you fast track this guy, Troy? Can you fast track this guy?"
He's a natural.
And right, and you know, the blunt answer to that is no. There's absolutely no fast track to anything worth mastering, and mastery of anything is a difficult path that winds uphill, and there are no shortcuts. But it got me thinking. If there's a shortcut, and this was before Malcolm Gladwell and the whole 10,000 hours thing, but you still have the concept. It's like, well, how long does it take to get somebody really comfortable in a racing shell? And so I got working on the idea of, okay, there's no shortcut, but if there's a shortcut, what is it? How do you cut the 10,000 hours down to 3,000 hours or 2,000 hours? And I just sort of hit on the idea that it really has to do with how fast can you get the person comfortable in the boat to the point that the boat is not a place to be feared. It's like, oh, I'm going in this tippy boat. You incessantly hear people talking about, oh, it's a tippy boat. It's a tippy boat. Right. The boat is not inherently tippy. If you're in the boat and it's tipping, it's because you are tipping it. So can we learn to be less tippy ourselves, and then that renders the boat less tippy? And the answer is yes. And so, you can do boat tricks just for the sake of doing boat tricks, and that's a lot of fun. And I think a lot of people do it. But if you sort of deliberately approach boat tricks with the idea that what I am doing is training my nervous system the same way that an 11-month-old is training her nervous system when she's learning to stand up and pull herself up on furniture and take her first steps. That's a complicated problem for the nervous system to solve. Yeah. And because when we're toddlers, we don't judge our experience very much. We don't fall over and say, oh, this walking thing is just too hard. I don't think I'm ever going to get this right. I'm going to stick to crawling. We get to be 12, 14, 16 years old and we start judging the situation. It's like, this is so humiliating. And adults are so resistant to, you got the old cliche about you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, okay, not if you start with that attitude.
Right.
So one of the first things I say in my doc talk about comfort in the boat is, you've got to be a good toddler about it, and shed the idea that if I capsize, that's going to be a grand humiliation, and all my friends are going to laugh at me. It's like, if you capsize, you're going to get wet, and we'll help you get back in the boat. Get over it.
And everybody capsizes, so just don't worry about that piece. That's great. So Troy had done a webinar series this winter at Craftsbury, and I'll link to that in the show notes below and on the speaker page. And in the webinar, you referenced that neurological before biomechanical. To perform optimally in any sport, the athlete needs to be in a very specific neurological state. Can you explain that neurological state?
Yeah, I hope so, at least in layman's terms. The I think I'll start with another analogy. If you had a room full of very tall people who all had that in common, and 100 of them were professional basketball players, and 100 of them were not professional basketball players, if you just sort of wandered around that room and watched them all for a little while, it wouldn't be that hard to separate the basketball players into the non-basketball players just based on the way that they move.
Oh,
And if that's not convincing, then the next story I'll tell. I don't know how many people listening are familiar with the television shows, or actually, I guess they're Netflix shows, or whatever we're calling TV shows now. But there's the Deadwood and Justified. There's an actor named Timothy Oliphant, and he plays a gunslinger in both of them. Deadwood is set in the 19th century in the Old West, and Justified is kind of a modern Western, but he plays a gunslinger in both of them. And of course, I don't know, are there really gunslingers left? Are there people who can draw their weapon and shoot around accurately in 0.13 seconds? I'm sure there are, but if you're a casting director and you're looking for a guy to play a gunslinger, you're probably not going to find an actual gunslinger. So who do you look to? And I got to thinking about that, and I was like, all right, who would I cast as a gunslinger to have that sort of easy flowing, relaxed, loose-limbed movement?
yep.
And I thought, I'll bet you Timothy Oliphant is a swimmer. And
Ah,
I got on Wikipedia and went to his Wikipedia page, and sure enough, Timothy Oliphant swam at the University of Southern California. And I was like, there it is. You know,
there
if
it is.
you're looking for somebody to play a gunslinger, those guys have got a very specific neurological state that they're in, and they stay in that state most of their lives, but especially when they're in the pool. If you want a gunslinger, get somebody with loose limbs like a swimmer. So they did. So, you know, every sport sort of has its characteristic movement patterns, and I think for the most part, they're learned passively by watching other athletes who are better than you are do what they do.
Mhm.
And if you're a football player, you learn to move like a football player. If you're a gymnast, you start learning to move like a gymnast. If you're a sculler, you start learning to move like a sculler. So I think it's sort of important to choose your role models carefully. But I think most of us do, because we tend to look at the people in the club who scull the best, and we say, okay, what can I do to make myself look more like that?
Right.
So in large part, it's a deliberate cultivation of looking at the people who've spent the 10,000 hours and seeing what they look like and saying, okay, how can I get there? How can I get where they are?
Right. So you talk about a neurological component and then a biomechanical component. The biomechanical component, as I understand it, is simply the physical training that you're doing when you repeat a sport or learn a sport and get better and better and better and better. And then the neurological side of it is sort of more of, as you say, the attitude of the comfort and the kind of being in a flow, I would say. And would you say those things need to be in balance 50-50, or is one of them more important than the other in terms of performance?
My mind immediately goes to what, and I've heard other people say this at other people's weddings, but somebody told me just before I got married that a good marriage is not 50-50. Don't think that way. A good marriage is 100 and 100. And if both partners aren't giving 100, then it's not a good marriage. And, you know, as sort of platitudinous, if that's a word, as that is, I don't think it's 50 biomechanical and 50 neurological. I think that if you're lacking one or the other, you're sunk.
Okay.
But you know, the biomechanical element, it's more measurable than the neurological, because you can get yourself an Empower Oar Lock and it'll tell you exactly how long it takes from the time your blade enters the water until the time your blade is loaded. So, you know, biomechanics deals with things that are more measurable than and I don't know that there's a word for what comfort in the boat is trying to do other than cultivate that neurological state that you need to have in order to be comfortable in the boat. So I don't know. I may be going in circles a little bit here, but biomechanics is very measurable, and but by the same token, if you are absolutely stiff and rigid, it's going to be very hard for you to take advantage of what the biomechanics offers you.
Right.
Getting your body in exactly the right position while you're rigid isn't going to help you.
Okay.
The same way that a basketball player might have flawless anatomical. Well, he's not. Well, they're so intertwined that I almost think they're inextricable.
Okay. All right. So that gets me to my next question, which is, if we need to have this neurological component and the biomechanical component, how do we get there consistently and reliably? And maybe we can start with a drill, one drill that you liked, maybe start people out to start training their nervous systems to become more comfortable. And as you say, not be one with the boat, but don't fight the boat, don't sit on the boat, be with the boat, or whatever you want to call it. Is there a drill that you recommend that will help people get started on this path?
There is, and I'll start by telling two very quick stories. We had two sculling campers at Craftsbury, very memorable. One of them was a very big guy, maybe 6'5" and 225 pounds. And
Wow.
he was absolutely so tense in the shell that I kidded him on the dock one day that there were fighter pilots doing training runs over from Burlington and flying over Hosmer Pond. And I pointed up to one of them and I said, the pilot in that jet can see how tense you are right now. And it broke him up. And for just a couple of tenths of a second, he relaxed and he wasn't tense in the boat anymore. And then he remembered where he was and he got tense again.
Yeah.
And by the same token, there was a pretty proficient master's female sculler. But one day as is my habit, because I like to use this drill a lot, I just asked her to come up and sit at the front end at the catch with her blades feathered. And she said, no.
No, I didn't know that was an option.
Why not? And I said, well, she said, well, that's where the boat's tippiest, and I don't want to go there if my boat is not moving. And I thought, okay, as long as you are reluctant to go to the front end, you're going to tend to get tense as you approach the front end, and that's going to have an effect on the rhythm of your stroke, on the relaxation of your body. So to cut to the chase, just sitting easy at the front end, I think, is the most fundamental drill in sculling.
Okay, I've got some photos here I'm going to share with people. So this is what Troy's talking about. Up at the catch, blades buried, squared, not moving. And anybody who's been in a single knows that you're right. This is the scary part of the stroke. And it's scary when you're moving. It's even scarier when you're not moving, because you've got to hold everything. And then they tell you, okay, now relax. So is this it? They just have to come up to the front of the stroke and sit until they're comfortable, or?
Well, yeah, Chris, and you said scary about 8 or 9 times there in the same sentence. And the first thing I would do is just banish that word from its association with the front end.
Okay.
It's a vulnerable position, but the analogy I always use here is of a tightrope walker. And a tightrope walker, he doesn't consider himself to be in a scary place because it has ceased to be scary, because his nervous system has adapted to it. And maybe if he's on a tightrope that's stretched between 2 buildings that are 100 stories high and the wind is blowing, maybe he's a little anxious, but still, Yeah, but in that case, maybe he doesn't go out on the tightrope. But the point is, it's not an inherently scary situation. It is an inherently vulnerable situation. But if you are comfortable there, and it takes however long it takes. Maybe you get comfortable there in one session. Maybe you get comfortable there over a period of a year. In most cases, it's a matter of a few days before you start to really feel noticeable differences in, oh, okay, I can be here and not think this is something that I don't want to do. I had a similar experience over the winter. That Wim Hof is big right now, and if you told me 2 years ago that I was going to be getting myself in cold water and staying there for 90 seconds at a time, I hate cold water. I just said, there's no way. But
You can do it.
you start doing cold water plunges, and your body adapts to it, and it never becomes comfortable like a hot tub, but that's not the point.
Right.
And actually maybe that's a bad analogy, because eventually sitting at the catch does become pretty comfortable and pretty easy to do.
It does. Yep.
I haven't thought about the front end as the scary place in years, and I just sort of have to keep it on the back burner that my comfort level at the front end is not the comfort level of our campers. So we have to be patient with everybody to confront that, what they think is a dragon and is really a house cat.
Right. And as you say, approach it like a toddler. Initially, it's going to be a little nerve-wracking, but the more you do it, the easier it gets. The more you do it, the easier it gets. The more you're comfortable, the more you relax. The more relaxed, the better it gets, the easier it gets. And it's a progression. So you don't need to torture yourself. You just need to kind of put yourself in that vulnerable position and then back off a little bit. And every time you do that, from what I'm understanding, is your body gets a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more acclimated to being there. And, eventually it's no big deal to be at the front end. And I can attest to that. When I first started this drill, it was very nerve-wracking. And now I can do it without any nerves whatsoever. So testament to you. Which brings me to my next question, which is, how quickly will our brains and body adapt to these kinds of drills, these kinds of building of habits to help our nervous system become more adapted at being in these situations?
How quickly can you attain enlightenment by meditating?
Exactly. That's an easy question. Come on.
So yeah,
As a master, right?
Not to deflect the question, but it really does vary. And I was going to say the other side of the coin of eventually the sitting at the front end becomes comfortable. You can resist it for the rest of your life if that's what you want to do. In most cases, I really think that there's an improvement on the same day, and within a couple of weeks, if you play around with it every time you get in the boat, it's a night and day difference. Having said that, I don't know that there's nobody that I've met that is never nervous at the front end. It may take white caps, or it may take hitting a buoy or a log when you didn't expect it. Everybody has the oh my God moment every now and then, at least as far as I know. Andrew Campbell, the course record holder at the head of the Charles, and a very fine lightweight who made many, many national teams over the years, he hit a buoy and flipped in the semifinals at the World Championships one year, and the next day went out and set a record for the fastest 2K by a lightweight in the history of the world in the final. I haven't asked him in the 3 times in passing that I've run into him if he had an oh my God moment when he hit the buoy, or if he just got wet. But I don't think mastery of it is a spectrum, and
so we don't need 10,000 hours in the boat to be comfortable. You'll see results relatively quickly, as you say, potentially in the same day. Maybe after 3 days, you'll start to notice a shift. And as you say, if you have the right attitude and you keep working on it, it'll get better and better, better. Like any habit that you build, if you keep working on it, you'll improve. And but you have to sort of, you can't just phone it in. You have to actually be deliberate. It was my understanding. So,
Yeah,
um,
and you have to have faith that it will work. I
right,
do that. The rare exception, we've got a few people who come to Craftsbury every year, and either if they come to the Comfort in the Boat session at all, they hang in the back and they don't take a lot of chances, and they come out of it not having accomplished much more than they would have if they had
right.
just gone for a skull. But if you really do have faith in the plasticity of your brain, and you don't resist it, everybody will improve.
All right. So even masters rowers, you can still do this. All right. So I'm going to have you give us another drill. And this one is more helping shift our attitude around safety with that death grip on the oars. So what's a drill for that?
The sort of the culminating drill of that some people are going to be brave enough to try it right off the bat, and other people are going to want to do baby steps. But there's the high mom drill where you sit at the front end, and it's easier to do this the first time with your blades feathered. And in fact, most of the drills in this series, the stationary ones anyway, they can be done either blades feathered or blades squared. And blades feathered is a good bit more reassuring because you just have more surface area to hold you up a little bit. But
Yep.
you get up to the front end and you let go of a handle, and when you realize that it's not your oar handles keeping you in the boat, and that you're really managing the boat with your sit bones and where your weight is, you can do this drill. I was coaching one of the Green Racing Project lightweights one summer, and she had missed the Comfort in the Boat session that we did with everybody. And so I was just taking her through some of the drills really quickly. And I said, okay, Sarah, come up and sit at the front end and now let go of an oar handle. And her eyes got real big and she said, are you serious? And I mean, this is a very proficient sculler with near national team speed. And she didn't know you could do that.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think the initial step is just relaxing your fingers and not holding the oar handles. And my colleague Ricky, who's been at Craftsbury almost since the beginning, he's fond of saying, you don't need to hold the oars. The oar locks are already doing that for you. And yet when we're beginning scullers, we tend to hold on to our oar handles like they're lifelines, without which we're, some sea monster is going to rise up and get us.
Right. I've probably been told by coaches, never let go of your oars.
Right, and that's in the webinar, and I usually trot that story out as well. I think never let go of your oar handles. It's well-meaning advice, and if your sole goal is to keep all the novices dry on their first day,
Mm-hmm.
it's effective. But I really think it plants a seed of fear and makes people think, oh, I have to hold on to these things or something bad will happen.
Yep.
And
yep.
Clearly that's not true. I mean, we have this kid that you've got up here, and he's got his hand way up in the air, and his oar handle has nothing on it. Well, as long as your weight's in the middle, you're going to stay in the boat. If you panic and get rigid, you're probably going to get wet.
Right. Okay. All right. Let me go through a couple more of these great photos just to kind of show people the progression. The next one is a little bit more advanced, where we're standing in the boat and we're starting to take the oars out of the oar locks. Obviously, the woman behind her was less successful with her attempt at that one, but that's a good one. And then we've got no oars, just standing in the boat. And I think this leads to the gondolier drill, if I recall correctly. And then last but not least, this is what you can do when you have finally mastered comfort in the boat. I love this shot. All right. So one thing I do want, I'm going to stop sharing here. One thing I do want to talk about, just really briefly, is that when you're doing these drills, it's important to focus on what you're attempting to do, and then not to stay there and dwell on it. So one of the things that I learned when I first went to Craftsbury, well, actually, when I first learned drills at Craftsbury, I would typically go back in the afternoon session and practice these drills over and over and over and over, like half an hour at a time. And then at another session, I realized that's not the ideal approach. So can you talk to us about doing the drill and then integrating the drill, how that works?
Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with there's nothing inherently wrong with doing comfort in the boat drills for half an hour or as long as they're keeping you amused. The important thing is, regardless of the length of the session, uh, after every time you do the drill or a few repetitions of the drill, you should stop, sit easy, take a break, take a breath cycle or two, maybe get a drink, and then go back to that drill or another drill.
Okay.
My wife is a Feldenkrais practitioner, and that's a sort of body work that's based on this same principle that you're trying to teach your nervous system different movement patterns. And one of his main principles is that when your nervous system is learning something, it's working harder than you think it is. You know,
Right.
these drills are not physically difficult, but they are a strain on your neurological system. And if you give yourself a short break, it allows you to process what you just did. And a lot of times what you find is that a drill that's very difficult for you, you do a few repetitions of it and you think, God, I'm never going to get this right. And you just take a break and sit easy, and you don't even think about the drill. You just let things rest, and you
Yep.
go back and you try the drill again, and all of a sudden it's, oh, that's much easier. I didn't even think any more about it. I didn't visualize it, but somehow my unconscious mind worked on it a little bit,
All right.
and when I repeated it, it was easier. And
Good.
if it's not, well, set it aside and try it another day. You know,
Okay.
typically,
Don't
uh,
force it. Yeah.
right. And so continuing to do a drill over and over and over again when it's clearly when your performance is getting worse, just stop the drill and do something else and come back to that drill some other day. Having said, yeah, it's okay to do 30 minutes of it as long as you're taking frequent short breaks. I think a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, God, you have to do a half an hour of it. Well, no,
No.
you can do one drill right off the dock as you're launching, just to get your head in the boat.
Yep.
One of my favorite drills that I used this with my crews long before I came up with the idea of comfort in the boat and sort of deliberately and systematically employing stationary drills and other drills to get more comfortable in the boat. Just the tapping drill where you're sitting at body over, or you're sitting at arms away, or you're sitting at quarter slide and just tapping the blades in and out of the water rhythmically so that the boat stays on an even keel, even though the blades are going in and out. That drill shows you very immediately whose head is in the boat. And
Yeah.
if you're in a single, it shows you how conscious you are of what the boat is doing, because if your timing isn't right on, the boat will roll from side to side.
Yep.
And you realize, oh, I'm not doing this as well as I could. A lot of times I have people try to snap both fingers at the same time, and it's remarkably difficult. If you really pay attention, it's almost always a little bit off.
Yep.
When you get one that it's almost right on, and you're like, oh, cool. Well, you know, if you can't snap your fingers at exactly the same time without a lot of practice, it's probably going to take a lot of practice to get your blades in and out of the water at the same time.
Okay.
So even if you're just doing the tapping drill.
I like that. That's a great one. So as we wrap up, you did mention in the webinar that positive physiological adaptation comes naturally as we practice the stroke or our sport over and over again, but positive neurological adaptation does not. Can you explain that?
Well, I should start by saying I was thinking about this earlier today, and I think it's a little bit of an oversimplification to say that. I think it's a useful oversimplification.
Okay.
You know, if you row enough miles, your your capillaries are going to react to that. Your mitochondria is going to react to that. Your body's going to say, okay, I need to produce more red blood cells because this person is demanding more oxygen from me than I am used to processing. So to a great degree, it is true that if you just do enough repetitions of any exercise, your body will adapt to that and make itself more able to do more of it. And the neurological aspect of it, if you row in a way that is not relaxed for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of strokes, your brain processes that as this is what it feels like to row. And it's difficult to get over that, because I'm not one of those people who thinks that bad habits become so permanently ingrained that you can't overcome them. But sometimes it is hard. I'll tell a story on myself. In the summer of, I think it was 2019, I was working on being a little less aggressive at the catch and saving something to finish the drive with. This whole idea of patience around the front end.
Yep.
And I had worked on it for several weeks from the time that the ice went out to mid-June. And my fellow coach at Craftsbury, Noel Warner, who coaches at Tufts University, was out, and he happened to be in a coaching lunch. And I was like, Noel, take a look at me and tell me what you see. And I didn't give him any prompts or any hints. And bear in mind, I'd been working on patience at the front end for weeks, and he stopped me after 90 seconds and said, "You're hitting the front end too hard."
Oh, no.
I was like, well, damn it, I thought I had it down. And so I worked on it for another 6 or 8 weeks, and in early August, Peter Graves was coaching at Craftsbury, and he was out of the coaching lunch. I said, "Peter, watch me for a few strokes and tell me what you see." He stops me after a little while and says, "You're hitting the front end too hard."
Oh.
So, you know, once the neurological is there, you really have to find something that is either it's so rewarding that you know this is better, and so it makes an instant change. But more commonly, even though you feel that it's better, your habits keep creeping back in, and you just have to keep repeating and repeating and repeating until you establish the new pattern. And now I've even forgotten what the question was in the first place.
Well, it was all about habits, and that's what I was thinking about is, if you do it without really focusing or thinking about what you're doing, you're just doing it to do it, you're not going to get as much gain out of it unless you are conscious in the moment, really focusing on what you're trying to achieve with the drill. Like any drill, if you just do the drill to do the drill, you're not going to get much out of it. If you do the drill with intent and focus and consciousness, you'll get more out of it. And like any habit, if you add in a new habit that's an improved habit, and you can slowly crowd out the old habit, which might have been a less ideal habit. So as long as you're paying attention to what you're doing, I think you will move yourself in the right direction. But if you're thinking about, what you need to buy at the grocery store, or, what you did on a test or something like that, your head's not in the game, I don't think you're going to get as much out of the neurological training as you might when you're really focused on what it is you're trying to do. So that's where I was going with that. Okay. So as we wrap up here, as a takeaway, is there one action step that folks can take to improve their comfort in the boat? Something really simple.
Spend more time sitting at the catch.
Okay. Good answer. And Troy's got a free gift for our viewers of the Masterclass. It's the working title right now is Troy's Favorite Drills for Developing Comfort in the Boat. And those will include sitting at the front, the high mom drill, or the high mom drill, and a few others. And it has some photos and things like that. So if you're looking to get more comfortable in the boat, and you'd like a little guidebook to help you get from where you are to where you'd like to be, you can download that little gift for free. And I'll have the information in the show notes below, and on the speaker page, and in the workbook. So as we wrap up, how can people learn more about the Craftsbury Skilling Program?
Well, to start with, the website is a rich resource, and we actually um, we changed websites. We created an entirely new website about 18 months ago, I want to
Yeah,
say. I
I like it.
get the chronology wrong, but in any event, there's a wealth of information on that, not only on our sculling camps and sculling programs, but our outstanding Nordic ski program, biathlon, mountain biking, running. Um, I'm a huge endorser of using Nordic skiing as cross training if you live
Yeah.
where that's possible. Um, and beyond that, there's word of mouth. Chances are, if you are a member of a rowing club, somebody in your rowing club has probably been to Craftsbury. We do a
Exactly.
raffle at the head of the Charles every year, and on our raffle card, there's a line down at the bottom that has the question, how did you first hear about Craftsbury? And the most common response to that is, everybody knows about Craftsbury.
Right.
I don't want that to sound arrogant, because I have also run into people. We had a girl who was an intern for us 2 summers ago, and I was surprised to find out that she had in fact been rowing for 8 years, and she had never heard of Craftsbury
There you
until
go.
she saw our booth at the head of the Charles. So
Ah,
um, you can come talk to us at the head of the Charles. You can go to our website. You can look at Road 2K. You can talk to people in your club who have been to Craftsbury, who are first words out of their mouth are probably going to be, as Christine referenced at the beginning of this interview, the food there is great.
the
Before I
rowing's great too. Everything's great about Craftsbury: location, the water, the coaching, the food, cross training, all the accommodations, facilities. It's beautiful. And one of the great things is there's not a lot of reception up there for the internet. So you're really off the grid, which is a nice way to take a serious vacation break and not have to, jump on the internet when you need to. You can if you have to, but it's nice to kind of let it go. So what would be the best way to reach you? Do you want them to reach you through the website or email, or what's
Sculling at craftsbury.com is a good one.
okay?
And at least historically, it hasn't gotten such overwhelming traffic that I can't respond to most of what comes to sculling at craftsbury.com.
All right.
We'll see if this audience of hundreds of thousands floods it, but
Yes, let's try and break it. Let's try and break your website. So, so this has been great fun, Troy. Thank you for coming on the Masterclass series and sharing your comfort in the boat tips and tricks, and telling us more about Craftsbury. I know there are a lot of people that are new to rowing, particularly with the pandemic. A lot of them are doing indoor rowing or considering doing on the water rowing. It's a great transition to go to Craftsbury and really learn. As I said, you can be a brand new beginner, never in a boat. And I forgot where my thought was going with that. But and not everybody has heard of Craftsbury, because there's a lot of people that are all a lot of older folks are coming to rowing as adults, so they're not necessarily coming through the schools or the colleges. So we want to make sure that everybody has access to the Craftsbury program and the Craftsbury camps, and they get an experience with your camps, which fill up really quickly. So if you're interested, book early. Even with the pandemic, get your reservations in. I think you guys are taking reservations by phone right now, not on the website, but you can learn more on the website. So thank you again, Troy. This has been a pleasure to have you on the series. And for everybody else who's watching this, there's more to come. So stay tuned, watch your email. And until then, have a great row. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.